Welcome, Wargamers, to the Forests of Kindling, ripe for a fire in the mortal realms, because today we are talking about the Pyregheists in the new Warcry set Pyre and Floods, which Games Workshop was kind enough to send to me. Now, I recently did a video on the Lumineth Realm Lords that come in this set, the Idrillin Riverblades, and I wanted to do a follow-up discussion here to talk about the Pyregheists, one of the newest units to dawn for the Nighthaunt, which I'm very excited for. On the surface, these seem very simple, like Flamethrower Nighthaunt, which honestly it's a pretty good selling point for me already. But of course, since Nagash is involved, there's always a bit more going on under the hood than first glimpse. And so we're going to talk all about the Pyregeist, their role in the army, what makes them special, unique, the kind of missions that they're sent on, and how they ended up in the Gnarlwood in this particular set for Warcry. Now, before getting into that, really quick, if you are interested in this video and you like any AOS or hobby supplies, please consider using any of the links in my link tree down below. You'll see all the money you save on each one of those, and every time you use one of those links, it throws a tip in my tip jar, and it goes directly to supporting me, my wife, our cats, the whole channel, and I could not be more thankful. And if you're looking to learn more about Warcry or how these guys are going to fit into Nighthaunt going into 4th edition, be sure to check out Goonhammer for a bunch of cool tactics and how-to videos. For those of you who are new to Age of Sigmar or the faction, the Nighthaunt were the big bad of 2.0. Mostly spawned from the Necroquake Nagash had cast, a new army of spirits and geists and haunts began to roam the realms. Now, they were initially spawned everywhere with kind of a lack of control. Nagash's spell didn't go quite the way it was supposed to, but they were later forged into a much more focused army under the rule of the newest Mortarch, Lady Olander, at least newest at the time. And if you want to see this army in action, I cannot recommend go read Soul Wars. It's one of my favorite books for the Age of Sigmar universe, and the Wrath of the Everchosen campaign book is another absolute banger with a great fight scene of the Nighthaunt. And the reason I point these books out is because when you are on the receiving end of fighting them, the way that it's described is like terrifying. There's like screaming forces of nature, like whole walls flying in the sky coming at you of just faces and claws. It disorients, they demoralize, and they murder with ease. And so I kind of wanted you to have that headspace as we talk about adding a new unit into that kind of insanity. Because there's a lot more going on here than if you've seen my, Nighthaunt series. These are not just generic Casper ghosts that just rush at people. In fact, what form any particular Nighthaunt unit takes is largely decided by Nagash himself. See, he sees himself as the ruler of the underworlds, the only one fit to dole out eternal punishments, for he has seen the sins of the realms kind of a thing. But here's the truth. Nagash is a very practical guy. I don't have or want the real estate to have these guys just get tortured 24/7 and then also have to worry about an army. And so what does he do? He doubles up. Everyone's a twofer. They're all serving an eternal punishment while dishing out punishment as part of Nagash's army. They are forced to do terrible things. And a perfect example of this is our subject today, the Pyregheists. You see, in life, these were the wise men, the priests, and the healers who sought to ease the pain of death by providing comfort and care to the corpses of the recently deceased. Essentially, they'd have some blessing, benediction, or ritual rite over the body, which would functionally make it so that necromancers couldn't use the corpse or repurpose the animating spirit of the soul. And then they would burn the body. And this makes perfect sense if you live in, say, Shyish. You don't want a wind of death magic to blow over your village, and then all the dead people are up from the ground uncontrolled by a necromancer, right? That animating spirit just kind of fills them. This essentially puts a lock on the body so that no one can touch its body or soul, and then we can dispose of it in a respectful manner. In a sense, it's like a religious practice that will guarantee peace after death, which, in a setting with actual necromancers, would probably be quite nice. But of course, Nagash, the great necromancer, sees this as, an incomprehensible crime. In his mind, it's the natural order for people to die and their souls to come directly to him, and that's how it should be in his mind. To do these rituals is to deny souls and bodies that belong to the great necromancer. These are soul thieves, one and all. Even if they're not stealing the souls for themselves, they're denying it to Nagash. And since there is no greater crime, it follows that there should be no greater punishment. These Pyregheists, as they're now called, now exist to do what they did before, burn stuff, but where once it was in service to the mortals of a community or town, now they burn stuff for Nagash. Their forms are compelled to ignite balefires across the realms, burning enemies and searing the souls of their victims in eternal flames. And behind the eyes of a Pyregeist is the soul of that good person being forced to enact the very thing that they fought in life against. They retain just enough vision and sentience to know how bad they are being. So burning things is the base function. But how does that serve Nagash outside of just being a weapon, right? Making someone do something they don't want to do for an eternity is one thing, but how does it fit into the greater Nighthaunt army? Well, these figures also tend to the Baleflame beacons that litter Shyish, and these are actually the first time I've really heard this mentioned is in this little booklet that comes in Pyre and Flood that I actually really like the idea from. Essentially, all across Shyish, there are these big pillars of green fire. They show up in the artwork sometimes, and they're sort of like lighthouse keepers for those big pyres. They constantly go out, burn a bunch of enemies, collect souls that they've destroyed in combat, and then they dump them into the beacon. The purpose of doing this is that these beacons act like little satellites of necromancy for Nagash. This is a great way to kind of extend his will and power even further, because they do a few things. One, it sets up kind of like a relay for Shyish. If an army is coming, these beacons can be used to alert each other like in the old days, right? When fires would go from a tower and it would kind of alert the next tower and so on. So that's a very practical thing, but it also allows armies to literally be quickly raised. Since there's a well of souls and undead right there at the point of the pyre, and the pyre is built into a defensible position, you just need a necromancer there to literally put the pieces together. You have the well of power, you have the bodies, you raise them, and you have an immediate defense that you didn't have to worry about stationing troops around for. If somebody attacks, like say a city's a Sigmar army, attacks someplace in Shyish, they have to hit this formidable defense, and if you're the Nighthaunt side, you can just keep falling back to the next pyre, and whatever invading force has to contend with waves upon waves of defenders that they were not anticipating, and that can respond rapidly. Hit them in the flanks, everything. All this to say, in a defensive kind of way, they can bleed an enemy army dry just for trying. That's what happens when they store all this power and bodies up in singular places, like these Balefire pyres. It kind of gives me the sense of like Napoleon's going through Russia, where it's just like they're being harried and harassed by the elements, by armies all around them, by wild animals. Everything just makes that linear trip devastatingly hard to where it always seems to sputter out, right? You can't really quite get to the finish line. That's how they function, at least on a defensive aspect in Shyish. And if you're watching this video because you grabbed that Warcry, Pyre and Flood box, I think because of all this, they make a great counter to the Lumineth Realm Lords in there, right? That warband is a collection of individual hero-level killers. But this is about function, a function which is carried out so efficiently that it incorporates the eternal punishments of its perpetrators. So it feels like it revolves more around a single character with a job to do. And what's more, while they do have this function of defending the perimeter, neither Nagash nor Lady Olander is content to just let them play guard duty. It's a great punishment for failure, but on the whole, these guys have a job to do and they can really do a lot of work up front. And so how do we use them on the offense? And the battle plan, in so much as Lady Olander generally has one, which is to say, kind of hand-wavy, is you use the Pyregheists as an effective flanking force or a solo force to cause massive mayhem. In game terms, for you and I, we would call this the Nighthaunt Distraction Carnifex. These forces, the Pyregheists, mean relatively little to the undead, right? They can rebuild them. And it's very self-sufficient. You incinerate enemies, collect souls, which then you can use to heal, repair, instill, defend, whatever you need them for, and just continue on their own. They don't need supplies. They don't need to fall back to anything. So they have nothing to lose and are worth very little. But say, for the cities of Sigmar, you just cannot afford to let any undead pyromaniacs loose and free around your city. If the main army is to the east, and these guys come from the west, and they burn all of your crops, your towns, your granaries, it doesn't really matter if they're a whole army. They have to be stopped for the sake of the stability of the entire region. You don't need to destroy a realm gate if you just douse it in so much fire that it's impassable. Same goes for any kind of major thoroughfare. And that's the kind of the tactic that they bring along with them, is that they're cheap and replaceable, but they represent such a catastrophic amount of damage and madness to the enemy that they cannot be ignored. And so these little pockets of Pyregheists are sent out far and wide, essentially to burn the realms and scour it of life. Collect all the souls that you can along the way for Nagash, set up pyres as you have too many to carry, I guess. And you're going to meet up with bigger elements, Nighthaunt armies, as it were, as you're needed. So I kind of like that they're built in with this idea of sort of being solo, not needing a whole lot of support, but fitting very well into the way Nighthaunt operate. And all of that brings us to why they are here in the Gnarlwood. This is a Warcry warband after all, and the simple answer is they saw a giant box of kindling and they wanted to set it on fire. Right, this group wandered into Gur. They saw the Gnarlwood forest as a great spot to cement some of those Balefire towers, and to purge this region of Gur of life would be a great honor to present to Nagash. Look how much stuff we killed, right? All the trees, all the wildlife, everything, you scour it. Think of how many dead bodies are at the bottom of the Gnarlwood just from your games alone. How many dead people have you left and or lost in these games? All of those souls and corpses are Nagash's if the Balefire levels the woods. And so that's the mission. They even moved in and began this massive undertaking. Again, it's like a continent-sized forest, and so they have a whole plan of doing it. They're going to establish a base head and then go light up some key parts of the forest to get the thing going en masse, have a few rituals to really kind of bring those fires together into one uber fire, and annihilate the forest in sections, essentially. They congregate in a region known as the Scorched Valley of the Gnarlwood, and they send out patrols to ignite the region piece by piece in sort of a pattern. Now, at the end of all my videos, I want to step back and say, why are these guys cool? What do they add to Nighthaunt as a whole? Sometimes it feels like Warcry warbands are kind of a meh addition to a faction, and sometimes it feels like they just truly lock in. And when I first looked at these models, I like them for sure. I mean, I like the poses, the Nighthaunt just look awesome. But I was unclear about what they really added to them as a faction. They have a lot of ghost boys, so these ones are toasty, who cares? But this warband touched on a few of the storytelling elements that I really like. One is the idea of punishment being turned into something functional. We see this with the Mirrormorn Banshees and the Jailers, Nagash taking a perceived offense and forcing you to do the opposite for eternity in recompense. And there's 3 sentences of lore here for each of the warriors in this band. I didn't cover it in the Lumineth Realm Lord band because frankly they all sounded the same. But an interesting thing here is that the boss is called the Deacon of Flames. Below him are the Balefire Guard, the Flame Wraiths, and bottom row is the Torch Wraiths. All of these various fighters are different because they served different roles in the mortuary cults in life. All those things that really ticked off Nagash, he basically mirrored their religious service duties in Afterlife. And as such, their punishments are tiered. So the actual performer of the rite is the Deacon of Flames, but even the guys who casually lit candles to keep him working into the night are punished as Torch Wraiths, just the most minute of little guys. So having a warband that essentially copy-pastes the responsibility structure of a church and twisting that into a murder gang is both awesome and decidedly Nagash. Undead and functional. The other aspect here is the unique goal that they bring to Gnarlwood. They don't want it, they want to burn it. There are no secrets or artifacts that they're hunting. They're not looking for some bonus to bring back to their boss. And this puts them directly at odds with just about every other warband that we've seen go into this place, but not to mention the Lumineth Realm Lords. Because they want to set everything on fire and the Lumineth want to open the river, which would then soak and cool everything. I assume their goal is to kind of leave it in ash, and the roots would probably stay alive underground, but then it would collapse inward and the river would stay closed. And I like this because coming at things with a different motivation makes the story so fascinating, because they can ebb and flow from an unlikely ally to an uber threat that me and other warbands need to stop. So if you're a Chaos warband and there's a Gitz warband in front of you, and you both want the treasure that's in the Gnarlwood, and a third party comes up and just wants to level the entire thing on a most practical level, you have a reason to at least prioritize someone else. Maybe not work together, but maybe overlook them a little bit. My point is motivations. Why do they do what they do? Why are these factions fighting? Why are they contained in this singular place? Make them interesting to me. But friends, those are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear yours. What do you think of the new Pyregheists and how they fit into the Illumineth? I don't know anything about their AOS 4.0 rules. I don't know a single thing, but I'm so curious to see how they articulate flamethrower ideas, right? Because that's just kind of what this section of the book is wreathed in, if you'll pardon me. It's just flamethrowers. That's the idea. Everything's fire themed for the Nighthaunt, and I like it. It's really cool. I just want to see how it's worded rules-wise. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will catch you next time. Happy wargaming, friends.